This Week in Richmond is made possible in part by Dignity Memorial, caring for our communities with a network of funeral homes and cemeteries in Virginia and throughout North America. More information about Dignity Memorial's providers is online at dignitymemorial.com. The Virginia Chamber of Commerce, the voice of the Virginia business community, working in legislative, regulatory, and political arenas to promote the free enterprise system. Information at vachamber.com. Virginia hospitals and health systems provide jobs. They support our economy and promote public health. Local hospitals are always open to help people with unexpected health needs. Having a stable healthcare network is vital. Virginia hospitals are our lifeline.
I just received a letter from a student who thanked me for instilling the love of math in him. That's why I teach.
Brought to you by the Virginia Education Association, because a good education is good for everybody.
Additional support is provided by these sponsors. And by the members of Virginia's public television stations. Thank you.
Welcome to This Week in Richmond, and a special welcome. I'll start right here with Kirk Cox, the Majority Leader in the House, Bobby Orrock, Chair of Health, Welfare and Institutions, Dave Albo, Chair of the Courts Committee. And it's Mr. Chairman, and former Mr. Chairman, now Mr. Majority Leader. And Bobby, today in JLARC, they were having this conversation, you're elected to another chairmanship. So it's,
double chairman. Short
yes.
term, wow.
And
He's a really important guy.
by some estimates, this will make you feel really young, but by some estimates, I think the three of you have almost 80 years of legislative experience. And it's just great to have the three of you on the show. And Kirk, I'd like to start with you. You're third ranking in seniority in the House, Bobby fourth, Dave seventh. I mean, gosh, three top 10 people. So my pleasure and our viewers' pleasure. But start with you, and you don't need to focus in on JLARC unless you want to. You had an interesting meeting, but anything about session past, and then Bobby and Dave the same, session past and session upcoming.
Well, I thought the session generally went pretty well. It was interesting. JLARC today talked a lot about oversight of economic development and tax credits, et cetera. And that's
Yes.
sort of a holdover from session when we really wanted to sort of make sure that all those programs work like we want them to. We also had during the session maybe a different approach to economic development. That's Go Virginia, which is a little bit different than what people are used to, the Governor's Opportunity Fund, where you go out and recruit one business or two businesses. This is basically trying to get the regions to work together, sort of decide what's best for that region, where's your skill gap in your workforce, and then hopefully as that matures, we actually give state grants that way. And most companies will tell you when they locate in an area, it's because of the region, the schools, not one locality like a Colonial Heights or a Chesterfield. So we did some pretty exciting things. I guess the other thing I'll mention quickly is we've been working really hard trying to get more veterans care centers, and these are state veterans care centers. We only have 2 in Virginia. You have states like Oklahoma and Maine that have 5 and 6. So we'll have 2 that will go up online, one in Hampton Roads and one up in Dave's area in Northern Virginia. We're very excited about because there are a lot of veterans in those 2 areas. Hampton Roads probably the most per capita of anyone. And they're very well run. They're run by the state, and so they're very state-of-the-art. They have Alzheimer's wings and skilled nursing care. So that's another good shout-out for our veterans.
Excellent, thank you. Bobby?
Well, and you'd mentioned the license plate seniority, as it were. I do just have to share with you and the listeners. Kirk is number 3, I'm number 4. We were elected the same year, but because Cox comes before Orrock, he's ahead of me in seniority. Several years ago when I had a number 10 on my plate, my daughter told me, well, Daddy, this is the only time in your life you'll be a number 10. So it's all in perspective. Do need to let folks know, by the way, when they see those plates, it's not a perk. We pay the exact same vanity plate fee as if you get your personal name on there, any other personalization, which I've tried to work on appropriations for a number of years to say this really ought to be a perk, but they haven't listened to me of yet. But following up kind of on the whole efficiency theme, one of the things that I think we've got to start addressing in the very near term is coming up with more objective cost-benefit analysis on measures that come before us frequently, and especially when it relates to budgetary issues. It kind of gets into just how many voices are shouting the loudest versus how can we use these monies in the most effective and efficient way to benefit those with the most critical needs and helping where the needs are the greatest. So that's something I know all of us have been considering, and it's something for the future legislation, as you mentioned. I think we've got to become more focused on in all areas, but probably just starting off with some small steps on specific state agencies and try and come up with those objective criteria to go forward.
Excellent. Thank you. Dave?
Well, you asked about anything, right?
Yes,
So,
right. Wide open.
Well, I'm chairman of the House Courts of Justice Committee. One of the areas of our oversight is criminal laws. And everything was very smooth this whole year. We have no controversies until after we got out of veto session, and then the governor restored the rights of 206,000 felons. And just to give the viewers a background, when a person gets convicted of a felony, part of their punishment, besides possible jail and fines, is that they lose their right to vote, they lose their right to be on a jury, and they lose their firearm rights. And that is a state law. Convicted of a felony, you lose your right to vote. Only the governor can restore that right. And we believe that the governor can certainly do what he did, but he has to do it on an individual basis for people who have petitioned. What he did was just write a big order. Everybody who's ever been convicted of a crime and has finished their time now gets to vote. And that's a real problem. Now, when Governor McDonnell and Governor Kane, I know, would look at every single application individually, and what they wanted to see was not only did a person serve their time, pay all their restitution, but had they done some community service, given back to the community more than they took, and then they would restore the rights. This governor did it as a blanket movement, and we think that's probably illegal.
You know, it's interesting, not to spend more time on this issue than the three of you would want to, that one of the conservative columnists in the Richmond Times-Dispatch wrote a piece, and I don't know if it's tongue-in-cheek or not, but he was saying the governor didn't go far enough. He should have restored the right to also to have firearms. Barton Hinkle, I believe is his name. And again, I don't know whether that was tongue-in-cheek or whether that was really saying, why did he do two and stop with the third?
To me, you know, philosophically, if you believe that they're entitled to all rights as they had prior to it, why did he stop? But then to me, that begs all the more. It should be, as Dave said, considered on a case-by-case basis, because under his actions, it presumes all felonies are the same. That whether you used a firearm, whether you murdered somebody, or whether you just embezzled enough money in a white-collar crime and never hurt anybody, we treat you all the same because you're all in the same boat. Oh, but by the way, none of you can have a gun, because whether you did white-collar crime or you used a gun in commission of a felony, you never need to have one of those. I think it's just another means on the governor's part for further gun control.
And it's interesting, Paul Goldman, who's obviously a very big figure in the Democratic Party, wrote a scathing article against the governor's sort of mass restoration, as Dave was saying. And he really pointed out specifically crimes like rape. And, you know, we talk a lot about voting, which is a very important privilege, but the jury piece is what I'm getting a lot of kickback on, that you could have a convicted rapist who's really unrepentant to some degree, as Dave said, because they haven't been through any process, could actually sit on a jury. And so we're getting a lot of emails, interestingly, from our district. You know, and we've, you know, it just seems so political. It's 2 days after we leave veto session. The gun rights issue is interesting because it's one, obviously, that we disagree on the Second Amendment. And if you're really being philosophically pure, you would have looked at that, but that was never the intention. So it's been probably the thing that I've gotten the most communication from, obviously, over the last few weeks.
Well, that's probably an issue that will go on, and you'll keep hearing people contacting you on through the coming months as well. David, if I go back to you and thinking about the JLARC meeting this morning, get you to talk a bit more about it. There was some discussion about you're trying to get something passed in courts committee with regards to a criminal matter, and you got a really high budget cost. I think that would be interesting for the general viewers to know about that process that you have of getting another estimate on what it would cost.
Well, there's a delegate named Chip Woodrum who passed away maybe a couple of years ago, and he passed a law that said that if you create a new felony, that you have to have the money to pay for it, because
Right.
otherwise everything keeps on becoming illegal, more and more prison space, and so you have to have the money for the prison space. And the state executive branch does a study when a bill gets filed, and that study would say this bill costs $3 million, for example. On the courts committee, almost all of us are lawyers, so sometimes when we get an impact statement that says, say, $3 million, all of us know that's, come on. I mean, I've been practicing law for 28 years. There's no way it costs that.
Right.
What JLARC, Joint Legislative Audit Review Commission, which we've been talking about, one of the things that they can do is an independent study outside the executive branch to see whether or not that is actually a legit number. And what we're really trying to do is trying to maybe uncover a little politics. So governors on both sides of the aisle have done this. If they don't like a bill, sometimes they'll give it a real big price tag so you can't afford it.
And not just on courts of justice, but any measure that the department or the agency feels has a fiscal impact. And it has been interesting to observe over the years, if the department doesn't like a new policy that maybe we're trying to foist on them, it gets a humongous price tag. And so JLARC is a good safeguard against those. One of the actions from JLARC this morning is a recommendation that they will now inform the committee process, the committee chairs, when a particular department seems to be historically giving bad information as to fiscal impact, so that we can be aware of that in the process.
That will be interesting. And I think that going back to the Chip Woodrum time and then going back to JLARC being able to do this, it's maybe only, it's certainly during the time that you all have been here, but maybe only the last decade or so that you've been able to use JLARC that way to give you another estimate of the cost.
It's been very effective. I can remember we were in the minority. Boy, I got some fiscal impact statements back that I just looked at and went. And the way our process works is it's going to go to appropriations. And a lot of times what happens is we're constrained in the money we have. So if you get a big fiscal impact statement, you're going to lose the bill on that, not on the merits of the bill. And that's what is problematic about it. And I think it's also a nice watchdog, too, because as you use that, then I think the various agencies know that, boy, if you look silly with one of these physical impact statements and JLARC comes back with one that's much more reasonable, it shines a bad light on you. I think Bobby makes a key point. It really is going to be interesting to see if we do have certain agencies or certain entities that seem to be doing this more often than not, doing it simply for reasons to kill the bill. Seems to be more on controversial bills that you get those really high.
Yes.
Physical impact
You know, I'm sure the more egregious thing is when it's an overestimated one, but I do recall, I can't remember what the bill was, not too long ago, one that I observed in which it was like no fiscal impact, and legislators saying, this is bound to be costing something.
Yeah.
So
I wish I could get a few of those. It generally happens.
Yeah, the opposite that can happen. What about other issues that either from session that's ended or thinking ahead to the session coming up?
I'll throw one out there for you.
Good.
So I'm from Northern Virginia, right? So our #1 issue is always transportation.
Right.
And the bill I think we passed in 2013, called House Bill 2313, is really starting to work. You know, we were so broke in the state of Virginia, there was not even a single dollar to put one stoplight in the entire state of Virginia. Until that bill passed. And we have a Northern Virginia add-on. We've agreed to pay more in some fees under the non-negotiable rule that all of it has to stay in Northern Virginia. And so now we have about $400 million of local transportation construction money, lots of cones going up, and our streets are actually starting to be repaved, which is the really, really big thing up in Northern Virginia.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to brag a little about these two guys. You know, one of the things when the Republicans took over, I think we did a lot of really good efficiency types of things. I can remember I was on 4 or 5 committees. They all met at the same time. You had bills up at the same time. But both these gentlemen chair committees do a great job. But we finished the session now 1 day early twice. If you look at it, we have not raised fees or taxes. If you look at some of the structural things, which is not the most interesting stuff in the world, but the Virginia retirement system we had to talk about, we've really lessened the unfunded liability on that. Our rainy day fund is almost back up to $850 million, about 90% of pre-recession levels. So I would say one of the things I'm the proudest of is the Republican caucus. I think it's done a really good job of putting Virginia vis-a-vis other states on really sound physical footing. We can do better, and we will do better, but that's another thing that really is a kudos, I think, to our caucus.
And to follow up on that, one of the major changes I've seen over the tenure I've been here, I think we've made the whole process a lot more open and a lot more transparent while making it still more efficient. When we first came down here, and I think even Dave as well, you had subcommittees and you heard bills and the subcommittee made recommendations, but then it went to the full committee and you heard the bill all over again, whether it was good, bad, or otherwise. And the effect of that frequently, in almost all committees, not all bills got a hearing. Secondly, a lot of these meetings were going into the wee hours of the night or even into the early morning hours when you can say it's transparent because the public could come in. Who can afford to be there 2 o'clock in the morning when the committee's killing bills or not? So what we've done is we've set up specific rules of meeting where the subcommittees can't meet during the time when full committees are supposed to unless it's in place of the full committee. Subcommittees hear bills, and if not a majority of a subcommittee feels that a bill should go forward, then the full committee doesn't need to waste their time unless a majority of the full committee or the chairman of the full committee feel that it should still come before the full committee. So subcommittees do not technically kill bills, unlike what some have argued on that matter. The chairman or a majority of the full committee could bring them forward at any juncture, but it's just made the process work where it gets a hearing at the subcommittee level, it doesn't bog down the whole process, and things are done in a more timely manner, convenient to the public and the press when they can be there to actually observe the process. And I think the state's doing a better job of governing as a whole as a result.
Dave, I can recall, and each of you can, when courts committees went on and went on and went on, and beyond special subcommittees, you used two major ones that really helped move lots of bills through.
Well, we have about 26 or 28% of all the bills just in the courts committee, and we do meet late, but it hasn't been 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning in years. One thing about Bobby was talking about transparency. Every vote we take is on the internet. So I tell my clients, you are welcome to yell at me anytime, but you have to yell at me before the vote. And you can find out what the bills are, you can find out what the amendments are. All you got to do is sit in your living room and log on and you can find out. And that's why I always encourage people to call me before, because I can't do anything about my vote after.
Right. Yes, and hopefully they do, because otherwise it's not fair to really be after you when they haven't communicated what they had in mind before.
Well, and David, if I may just add to what Delegate Albo was saying, in addition, encourage folks to follow the process on the computer system, that when a bill is introduced, the bill summary is posted, but that summary doesn't change until after crossover, if then. And so while the committee may have made major changes to the legislation itself through the process of your lobbying down here, I think you've seen bills that you initially opposed but ended up supporting, or vice versa, just because the language changed through the process. So the public needs to stay on top of it. It's easy to do with their computers now anymore, and all of our meetings are open to the public.
You might want to tell folks too about this time between sessions. I mean, you just came from a JLARC committee meeting. There'll be other meetings. What would you all be encouraging? I know you encourage your individual constituents, but folks around the Commonwealth to do in this time between now and January?
Well, the thing that I always say is that, come see us when we're not in session, because obviously we can spend more time. If you really feel passionately about an issue, we can sit down with you and really discuss it. The problem with session, we do try to meet with folks, but a lot of times, if you have committee meetings and then session, et cetera, you might be able to spend 2 to 3 minutes, and it's a quick, very quick conversation. If you're passionate, you see someone, then they can come give you a refresher during session, and that's much more valuable than just showing up for the first time during session. So I tell the public all the time, use that opportunity to really come in. And the way we work, frankly, is just, the way probably it should work is, if you're from that district, we really try to pay very special attention to you, because you're all constituents. And so I would always say, get to know your local delegate. Some people, automatically go to the chairman, which is smart eventually, but you really should go to your local delegate and get his assistance, and it really makes the system work very well. The other thing we once again try to do as a caucus is we share ideas on how to communicate with our constituents. So we actually, believe it or not, knock on doors in the off session. We do a lot of newsletters. I think we sent out around 166,000 letters to different groups, just informing whether it be veterans or nurses or teachers what's going on. So we really try to make an effort as a caucus to communicate with our constituents and let them know what's going on. That's a good modern day change. Everybody talks about the good old days, but there's some good things about these days too.
All right, and using electronic media, all that.
Very much. Your websites, we try to keep those up to date, and a lot of notices of that sort.
And it's not like, David, that during the out of session time, we're just sitting around, what is a change I can make to the law next year? They're almost entirely driven by a constituency.
Right.
I just had a group come meet with me 2 weeks ago now that made me aware of a circumstance where locally a local developer had proffered certain maintenance of a roadway in perpetuity to the local government, but then wrote the provisions of actually paying for it into the homeowners association that the developer controls. So the developer never will pay for that proffer per se. Nothing illegal about that, but that's something that I was totally unaware of until a local constituent brought the issue to me, and I think that's a matter that we may need to discuss in the near term in the legislature.
Nothing illegal about it yet.
Yeah, that's right. We'll leave that to the courts.
Right,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's right.
Right. Well, the time will fly by, actually, and the session will be here, and people really need to be contacting you if they have some issue, and I'm sure they will.
Well, I mean, let me tell you something. I think the citizen legislature is the best thing that's ever been invented. Our system in Virginia works because we're part-time. Eventually, at some point, I have to walk across the aisle, shake somebody's hand and say, okay, let's compromise and get a budget done. And that's why Kirk, when he mentioned, we've been out of here too early twice in a row because we're citizen legislators and we get the job done. Unlike Washington, D.C., where everybody's permanent, there's no deadlines, they never have to compromise, and it doesn't work. And that's why the citizen legislature works in Virginia very well.
Okay. Now, we've got just a few minutes left, so Kirk, what's another issue that you said, I thought David was going to ask me about this, and I didn't.
Well, the two things I probably deal with the most in are K-12 and higher ed. Thought we had a very good K-12 budget this year. We were able to put about $900 million additional money. But more than that, money's a good thing. I taught school and Bobby taught also. But we also were able to return the lottery money, some of it back to localities, about 29%, with very few strings attached and with no local match. One of the things that we found out the last few years is localities have struggled. So I think that was a big accomplishment. In higher education, we've really tried to look at, and Dave's worked hard on this, access and affordability. You know, we just have a lot of students who make great grades, and they can't get in Virginia colleges. So we're really pressing our colleges. Let's do more with in-state students, and you got to make it more affordable. So we're looking at new models there. I think Liberty is sort of eating our lunch on online models. We're going to have to look at more of that on the public side. So those are two big issues I've worked on.
Thank you.
And I think one of the biggest challenges that we've been dealing with, and unfortunately looks like is going to continue for the near term, are federal restrictions and mandates that are placed on us. You look at our, $104 billion budget thereabouts, 62% of that is non-general fund. That we, the monies come from a certain funding stream and they have to go towards paying that area. And so when you look at meeting the flexible needs, shall we say, of the Commonwealth, you've got about a third of the budget to actually work with. And so that just becomes more problematic as the feds shove more and more restrictions down upon us. As Dave alluded to with their dysfunctional legislative process in Washington, frequently, as of late, they just kick the can down the road to the states to have to handle, and that just seems to get worse all the time. So that's something we're trying to work with our Virginia delegation on, but at the same time knowing we've got to handle it for the short term here at home.
Dave?
Well, the most pressing problem, I think, in Virginia right now is that we are tied so closely economically to the federal government. We have a 0% growth in Fairfax County, which is unheard of. And one of the reasons is because in my law practice, my regular job as a lawyer, everybody who comes to me with a problem works for the federal government, is a contractor on a federal contract, or works for somebody who sells stuff to a federal contractor. And when you have sequestration, the wars are ending, which is fantastic news, but there is just little and little money up in Northern Virginia, and I bet you Hampton Roads has got the same problem. So we are looking actively to reinvent our economy.
That's probably a good way to end it right there. Delegate Cox, Delegate Orrock, Delegate Albo, thank you each for being on This Week in Richmond, and look forward to following the work that you're doing on during the interim time before the next session. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
This Week in Richmond is made possible in part by Dignity Memorial, caring for our communities with a network of funeral homes and cemeteries in Virginia and throughout North America. More information about Dignity Memorial's providers is online at dignitymemorial.com. The Virginia Chamber of Commerce, the voice of the Virginia business community. For jobs, the economy, and public health, Virginia Hospitals, our lifeline.
The Virginia Education Association, because a good education is good for everybody.
Additional support is provided by these sponsors. And by the members of Virginia's public television stations. Thank you.